Hey, welcome to the next episode of Ignite That Light. This is episode 9. The topic is intentionality and knowing your why. I'm the host, PositivelyChris, and I'm here today to talk about that specific topic. But again, the reminder here is that the mission of this podcast is to motivate, inspire, and to really connect more deeply with one another. So hopefully this episode is another example of motivating, inspiring, and connecting. With that, I want to get started. I don't want to take up too much more of your time than I need to here, but this episode's important and it really resonates with me. The idea of intentionality. What is that? Well, the word intention, if you think about what that means, it means really knowing what your goal is, what you're trying to do. And sometimes when we go through life, it feels like, at least for me, it feels like I'm just kind of going through the motions. I'm doing things without really questioning why I'm doing them. And that can be a problem in the long run when I know for me in my own history, I have felt that I've just sort of gone along with a trend or with a group or with some sort of following that maybe I didn't really want to be involved in after all or connected with. So knowing really that reason why you're doing something and knowing what the goal is really super important in everyone's day to day. And I say this, and I can give two examples here. One is in the personal side and one's professional. I'll start with the professional side. Intentionality, knowing your why. Think about if you're going into a meeting with somebody or with a group, consider asking for an agenda every time before you even go into that meeting, right? Think about why that meeting exists. Could that meeting be an email? Thinking about the reasons why you're doing something is super important. On the personal side, if you think about events that you're invited to, there's this concept that I tell people about all the time. It's the joy of missing out, JOMO. It's sort of a joke, right? It sounds like a joke, but it's a serious thing. It's okay to say no to things. It's okay to decline an invitation. At the end of the day, it's a type of self-care in a sense. And one of my good friends, Amber Champagne, talks about self-care all the time. It's her passion. And it's something when you decline something, it's kind of a form of self-care in a sense. If you're declining an invite, especially if it's something you don't want to do. I've been guilty of accepting invites to things that I probably shouldn't have and that I didn't want to actually engage in, but I did that anyway because I wanted to just go along with things and never really end up enjoying those types of events where I am invited and I don't have that feeling of purpose of actually being there. So there's also another concept that ties into that. I don't want to go too far off, but when you really say no, there's nothing wrong with that. If you think about the purpose again, about knowing what you really want to do and that JOMO concept, the joy of missing out, because every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to a bunch of other things too. It's that opportunity cost example. And again, I'm not trying to give people a bunch of different things to research, but JOMO, opportunity cost, these are all concepts that have been helpful for me as I think about knowing my why and being more intentional with what I do. I know that's kind of a lot right there to digest, but when you think about intentionality and being intentional with what you do, there's a really good reason to be intentional. And one of them is there's multiple reasons, but one good reason is because it gives you a sense of purpose. It makes you feel like it makes you feel better about doing something when you actually have that sense of purpose, that sense of knowing why you're doing something. And again, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, there are many times in life where we might feel like we're just sort of swimming along in the river and going with the flow, and that's fine. That's fine in small doses. But there are times where you need to swim upstream and you need to kind of go against the go against the current, and that's okay too. So just be mindful of that, right? Like what's really the goal of the things that you're doing? Where's that, and knowing where that end is. Again, know where you're trying to get to, know what your goal is before you engage in some sort of event, activity, participate in something. Because again, we can either go one of two ways. One way is being very complacent, laissez-faire, and life just doesn't feel the same that way. Or we can be more direct. And again, this is something that I need to work on. I'm way too diplomatic in life. I don't always say exactly how I feel, and I'm working on that, and I need to do more work in being blunt and more direct about how I feel while also being respectful. But that's something that I wanted to also bring up, is that sense of purpose ties into that intentionality. A sense of fulfillment also ties into intentionality. When where I work, we have the opportunity to volunteer just about every month, and participating in these volunteer events is extremely important to me. And it might sound selfish, but it gives me this sense of fulfillment, that these, I don't know, there's some sort of, like, I'm sure there's some sort of chemical in my body that kind of boosts, I don't know if it's serotonin or what, but I probably have the wrong one. I'm sure somebody will tell me which one it is, but the that sense of fulfillment lasts for a long time when I engage in these events. And I've done things like walking dogs at the Humane Society, at their Humane Society. They have dogs that need to be walked regularly, and they need to be let out of the shelter for a little bit to stretch their legs. So I've done that. The diaper repackaging, I mentioned that recently in previous spaces on X and on this podcast. There are other events that I've participated in, and that sense of fulfillment, like I don't want to keep repeating myself here, but that sense is a really powerful sense of fulfillment. So knowing, but again, my why was, I want to achieve this outcome. I want to get to this outcome that's actually benefiting others. And it's a tangential, it's a byproduct of doing this volunteer work, that I'm getting this extra sense of fulfillment. But that's something that we get when we're more intentional anyway. Also, that feeling of connectedness. Doing these things like these volunteer events, I'm meeting people that I normally wouldn't meet as well. These people that work at these humane societies, at these food banks. You'll find that there are really, really amazing people that work there, really generous and giving people. And being connected to people like that, for me, those are people that I usually make friends with anyway. I really enjoy making friends with these people. They give a lot of themselves, and I think I give a lot of myself. I don't know if that's true. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I really enjoy meeting new people. Anyone who's conversed with me or interacted with me on X knows that I enjoy that interaction. Just because I have a semi-large following on the platform doesn't mean that I'm too important uh, to interact with you. Just, no matter what your size is, right? No matter what your following or follower count is, that's not as important as the connection. And so that's, again, these are all just concepts and thoughts and ideas that are worth reflecting on, I think, as we think about intentionality, knowing our why. And I know this, I haven't really even said anything yet about this, but there's a really fancy light here. It's the ignited light. I'm sure you guys see this, but wanted to highlight that. For those who are listening just to the podcast, they do have a really nice neon light. You're missing out if you're not watching this live stream on YouTube or on X. So make sure you find me at PositivelyChris on X. I also have a YouTube page. Subscribe there, follow, do all the fun things that you normally would do on all the socials. Yeah, so there's this really cool light, neon light behind me, the ignite, that light. It's a light that's ignited. Anyway, it's a dumb pun, but the word ignite is lit up here in neon. You gotta check this out. I'm also wearing, because it is Halloween, I'm wearing a really fancy, well, not fancy, but it's cool. The wife made it. It's It's a cool little Paw Patrol hat. You're missing out if you're not watching this live. You'll find it if you search for me on all the socials. Episode 9. This one again, I'm interviewing myself in a sense. And so now that we have this backstory, right, or this ground level understanding, what they call level setting, I think sometimes in the professional realm. Now that we've done that, I want to talk about why this podcast. Why is this important to me? Why am I doing this? And there are a variety of reasons, but it comes down to this. It's a challenge, but it's something that I've wanted to do. And so I'm doing more things that I want to do. That intentionality is being reflected here. I wanted to put together a podcast since 2007, 2006. I want to say when I first learned about podcasts. There's actually this really old version of 2 or 3 episodes of a podcast that I came up with that exists on the Internet Archives on archive. I think it's archive.org is the website. There's some old examples of audio podcasts that I've put together, and I've always wanted to do this as a challenge. It's learning by doing. The idea, the concept of putting something out there that is going to be used by other people, that means a lot to me. Hopefully, if I've impacted just one person with this podcast, I'm doing something right. That's my personal belief. I could be wrong, but that's how I feel about this. So that's really the why. It's because I want to do something that is going to challenge me, stimulate my mind, and also give back to the world. So why that name, Ignite That Light? People have asked me that, right? And that one kind of came to me. It needed to be something that didn't already exist. So I need to do some searching, obviously. But another reason why is because it sounded really cool. And it also is something that we all have this light inside of us. I'm a firm believer in that. There are things that switch that light on inside of us. There are things that motivate, inspire, captivate, you name it. There are things inside of us that really do flip that switch for us in a positive way. My name is @PositivelyChris on all the socials. I mean, it sort of is a nice dovetail there, right? So that's why it's really ignite that light. Not only does it sound cool, I firmly believe that you have a light in you. You really do. You need to hear this. Whoever needs to hear this, if it's all of you, great. If it's only some of you, that's great too. We all have a light inside of us. And I think sometimes it needs a little extra help in terms of getting it lit. And so that's what this podcast, that's where that name came from. And so why now? Like I said earlier, I've thought about doing this for 16 years. I think at this point, it's been a while. I didn't really have the self-belief. I had way too much self-doubt, and there was sort of this point in the middle of this year around, we'll say August, where life turned upside down for me, so on the social media platforms, and a change occurred to me, and so I needed to make a change as well, and I needed to do things that I want to do, and that I feel driven by, and that I feel reflect me. And this is what I want to do. I have the ability to. This is a proof that I have the ability. And I want to, like I said, give back to the world. And now is the time. We're all struggling. I've mentioned this on previous episodes of this podcast. I know for a fact that life isn't always positive. In fact, it's quite negative these days, if we're being perfectly honest. So the time is now to put something else out into the world that people can listen to, watch, hear, reflect on, and learn from and grow. I think those are all key concepts or key themes for me, is that I want whoever listens to this, whoever sees me on here, to understand that I don't have all the answers, and life can be hard, but we can motivate one another. We can inspire one another. We can connect with one another despite all of that, right? There's all this stuff in the world that's going on. We don't need to bring that into everything we do. We don't need to bring all of that negativity into our interactions socially. We can be aware of those things that are going on in the world, and it is tough right now. If you watch the news, it is rough. It's not fun. We're here at the end of October. Lots of things in the news right now that would make your head spin. Now is just not a fun time to be a daily news watcher. I'll say that, unless you're trying to get in on the low side of crypto, which again, that's kind of going up in price. So uh, maybe that's not the right topic, but the thing is, life is tough. It really is, and we need to help one another and lift one another. And I'm here for that. I really am, and I thank everyone who takes the time to listen, to watch, to subscribe, to comment on what I'm putting out into the world. I'm not perfect. Life isn't always positive. My username might be PositivelyChris, but that doesn't mean that everything in my world is positive. It's me choosing to be positive despite the negativity that exists. Hopefully that resonates. I mean, it might not for some people, but for some it might. And I want to put that out there so people know more about me. I think people are confused, and rightfully so. This probably should have been, like I said earlier, this should have been when I posted about this. This should have been episode 1, but I was so excited to get this ball rolling that we had an episode 1 with an amazing guest, by the way, the Mental Reboot. If you find him on X, amazing guy. Go follow him if you haven't already. I'm so grateful that he was so willing to jump in, head first into the conversations with me. But my goal here is to, again, motivate, inspire, and connect more deeply with others. And the people who listen, who watch this, my aspiration and my goal for that is that they feel more motivated, more inspired, and maybe a little more connected with either the guest or me, or just more connected with others in the world, feeling more connected. We could use a little more actual connection in this world, despite us being on our phones and on our computers and having these screens all around us. It sometimes feel like we're more disconnected despite all of that. And it's important for me to have that voice out there to let people know that there is somebody here who's listening, who's paying attention, who's watching, who is willing to help. And this is my personal request for those who might be feeling low, down, depressed, in the dumps. Reach out to me via DM, follow me on X, message me. I do reply to DMs. I interact pretty frequently on the timeline. I try to be connected to other people and try to show my support for others as well. And I try to keep it light and not too negative, because again, my name, like I choose to not dwell on the negativity. Again, negative things happen. Sometimes I do get sucked into that vortex, and I sometimes find myself being like, well, I better delete that. And so I do that like once or twice a day. I'll find myself like, yeah, maybe I don't want to put that out there after all. I might save things in drafts, and I might get ready to hit post, and then I'll save it to drafts because I'm like, that's just not worth my time. So I'm guilty of that probably more than anyone else. But my point is that I want to continue to be that voice, that light for others who might need it in this time of difficulty, and this time of this sense of impending doom, right? And it can feel bad. It really can. And I want to let everyone know who's listening to this, who's watching this, that I get that. I really, really do. Life has not been easy for me. My life has not been easy up to this point. I know the world and the world events also make things feel like things are falling down around us. Like there's a bunch of rubble all over the place. And I want people to understand that it's going to be okay. And I choose to believe that. I know some people will say, how do you know that? And I'm not going to go down that path. I'm going to say that I firmly believe that life will get better for us. And I want to be a voice to help inspire others. And that's not delusional. That's me being true to myself. I know I've gone on a little bit of a ramble there. We're now about 20 minutes into this episode. I'm super grateful for everyone's time. With the time we have left, I'm not going to spend too much more time. I do want to take a moment to pull up a few resources about intentionality and make sure that people understand that. Again, people know who this person is, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. It's important that we talk about being intentional, and everyone probably knows where I'm going with this, but I'm going to share it anyway. So I'm going to share my screen. Everyone, here we go. So hopefully y'all can see this. The author, Simon Sinek. He's an author of a few books, and actually not just Start With Why, but a few others. There's an amazing book called The Infinite Game that he's written. And so this author, I encourage people to read all of his books, not just the idea, or not just Start With Why, Find Your Why, a bunch of other books of his, but also Leaders Eat Last, another phenomenal book. Infinite Game, another one that I encourage people to look into. This talks about how the reality is that life itself, there's no defined endpoint, and so it's important to think about how game theory plays into our life, right? And it's important to play the long game, right? To really recognize that the transactional nature of our day-to-day isn't probably the most optimal way to go about life. And so this is a great book. But going back to, again, the key topic here, intentionality, knowing your why. A lot of people know that this book, the idea there, Start With Why. This is really I think the first one that most people think about. More than 1 million copies sold. Leaders Eat Last, another phenomenal book. Find Your Why, the more practical guide. Again, Start With Why is really kind of the big book that everyone talks about. Phenomenal book if you haven't read it. I encourage people to do that if they haven't purchased this book or acquired it. But it's worth getting this book, obtaining it, reading it. Even a Cliff's Notes version of it works. But just think about intentionality. That's my encouragement for people today. I know everyone's either out getting candy right now for Halloween, or maybe they're already done. But wherever you are in the world, I do want, again, thank you for your time today. I want to be super respectful. This is a shorter than normal episode, but that's fine. I want people to hear me and to be able to share this far and wide. I don't want to waste your time. It's important that you do what you want to do with your day. And I just want to say again, thank you everyone for being here and joining me on this episode of Ignite That Light. This is episode 9. Next week, I do want to say something before I go. Next week's episode 10, is the season finale. That's the last episode we have of Ignite That Light for this season. Then we'll be back in 2024 in January. We will be back. You will not stop hearing about Ignite That Light before then, but episode 10 is the season finale. We have a really special guest. I am absolutely thrilled that we have this guest. I'm not going to spoil it. You just need to stay tuned. Next Tuesday, 10 p.m. Eastern, Ignite That Light. Don't miss it. All right. With that, I want to sign off saying thank you so much for your time today. Remember that intentionality, knowing your why in your personal and professional lives. And I'll talk to you guys next Tuesday. Thanks.